Okay, welcome back. This is our second recording in our week 2 series, and this one is on research methods in the social sciences or in sociology. You should have your lecture quizzes open. We will be doing questions, 2 and 3 in this one. So get it open now. If not, pause and then come back. All right. So last week I gave you a definition for sociology, which is sociology is the scientific study of human societies. And I deconstructed the definition to show you the different parts of it. So society is a group or collectivity of people who share the same culture. And the other important part of this definition is scientific study, which is a study which seeks explanations and looks for patterns. Studies must be systematic and thorough beyond common sense notions. So the reason that I bring this definition back again from last week is to emphasize how important research methods are to sociology. Most of what we talk about in this class are theories and concepts and ideas related to the social world. But just as important as those concepts and theories are the methods that we use to research those concepts and theories. Otherwise, we would be philosophizing. But in sociology, we emphasize testing our concepts and theories, exploring them through research. So today I will be talking about the different methods that we use to explore the social world. So there are two major approaches to research. They are deductive and inductive. And although this isn't on your lecture quiz, you can assume that anything that I talk about here will be on your midterm exam. So a deductive approach to research is an approach which starts with a theory, and then you go on to develop a hypothesis. Then you make empirical observations, or you go out and collect your data, and then you analyze your data. But the important thing is you start with a theory and you go from there to develop a hypothesis. So, for instance, I'm going to save that one. Hold on. So when I was an undergraduate, I did a study on ghost towns. Believe it or not, I lived in New Mexico, and there were a lot of ghost towns. And I wanted to find out what life was like in these ghost towns. And I actually used the inductive approach, but if I had used the deductive approach, I would have started with a theory of what life was like. For instance, if they subsisted without jobs. And then I would have developed a hypothesis about that, and then I would have gone out and looked at ghost towns or interviewed people, which is what I did, and then I would have analyzed the data. An inductive approach to research, you actually start with your empirical observation, and that's what I did with my study that I did on the ghost town that I looked at in New Mexico. So you collect your data first. Like that you're interested in some aspect of the social world. Maybe you're interested in how people subsisted in a ghost town, did they work, that kind of thing. But you wouldn't make a theory or hypothesis about it in advance. You'd collect your data, and then you would let your theory emerge through the data. And then you would determine if a correlation exists by noticing if a change is observed in two things simultaneously. So if you were curious, what I found out was that most of the people did not have jobs, and that they worked collectively in an agricultural setting. It was a very small town, and so it turned out that they didn't have jobs. So this is this shows you deductive and inductive research. Deductive research, we start with number 1. We identify a problem. Then we conduct a literature review. We form a hypothesis, choose a research design, and collect our data. But here in inductive research, we would start here by collecting our data. I do believe we would have conducted a literature review first and identified a problem or question, but then we would analyze the data and write about it. Okay. So there are two main forms of research methods, quantitative and qualitative research methods. And I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, not take that much time. So quantitative methods, very simply, are research methods in which the data that we collect can be reducible into numeric format. And qualitative methods are those methods where the data that we collect really can't be reducible to numeric format. So qualitative methods like interviews, first of all, where we go out and we interview someone. I did that for my project on the ghost town. I interviewed a lot of people. That's a form of qualitative methods, and you can't really do statistics on that or reduce it somehow to numeric format. You use a different form of analysis to collect your observations and to analyze your observations. Quantitative methods are those in which we can derive numbers from the data that we collect. Usually what we're talking about here are surveys, and this is the answer to your second quiz question, that the most commonly used research method in quantitative methods is a survey. And let me see, that is your first option. From surveys, surveys, you know, they're kind of a lot like multiple choice quizzes that you guys take. They look very similar, where you make a choice, and those choices can be reduced to numeric format and then analyzed statistically. Quantitative methods are by far the most popular, but qualitative methods are gaining ground. When I was in school, they were not popular at all, but now they are very popular. Gosh, I'm not gonna, we can only have 15 minutes in these videos, so I'm not going to get to everything I had hoped to get to today. So this is a list of types of data collection, and I will go into some of them in a little bit of detail, but not all of them. So one of the things that we do is we choose a method of collecting data to do research that's most appropriate for our study. So, for instance, again, with my study on the ghost town, so this is a ghost town. Nobody lived there. And so I had to find people who had once lived there, and it was a very, very, very difficult task to do so. Doing a survey wasn't going to cut it, because I only found 3 people, maybe 4 people, who had ever lived there. And so a survey wasn't going to tell us that much. So I had to choose the research method that I felt would best serve my purposes, which was to learn more about what life was like in this town before it became a ghost town. So I chose interviewing. So the first thing you do is you choose a research method. The first one that I'm going to talk about is survey research. This is great for studying people's attitudes, opinions, or experiences. First, you select what you're going to survey. You ask questions about specific topics, and all are asked the same questions in the same way, standardized data in accountable format. So you can imagine the disadvantages are that people can't go into much detail. They can just choose the options given. Our next type of data collection is interviews. This is when you personally ask respondents. We call people that participate in our research studies, we call them respondents. When you personally ask them questions that you want answered by phone or in person, or trying to think how you might be able to do it, like by chat box. Obviously they have greater detail than surveys. You can ask follow-up questions, and there are some disadvantages. For instance, it's very expensive to do it. It takes a lot of time. You're only interviewing one person at a time, and interviews generally take an hour or more. Often you have widely dispersed populations, so you'll have to talk to people by phone. It's not as good as going to seeing them in person like that. Then we have field observation, and we call these participant and non-participant observation. This is when a researcher watches a social phenomenon unfold in its natural setting. So in order, for instance, if you wanted to know about classroom behavior, you could sit in a classroom and watch the behavior of people sitting in a classroom. There are two kinds of field observation: participant and non-participant. Participant observation is when you are engaging in the behavior that you're watching. So if you were going to observe classroom behavior and you were a student in the class, you would be you would be doing participant observation. If not, and you were just watching, it would be called non-participant observation. We don't use experimentation much in sociology. I am not going to get to all this in 15 minutes. So I'm going to move on to my next thing, which is variables. Variables are what we study. So a dependent variable is the outcome that a researcher is trying to explain. An independent variable is a measured factor that the researcher believes has a causal impact on the dependent variable. So in order to put this in English, in the picture that you see on the bottom of the screen, you can see what I want to look at is crime. Crime is my dependent variable. It's the outcome that I'm trying to explain. Now, maybe I'm trying to explain it by this middle variable here, urban decay. So urban decay would be the independent variable. Urban decay is like when where you live is super messed up with graffiti and dead cars that don't work and old buildings that are abandoned. That's called urban decay. So you would look at urban decay in relationship to crime and see if they are related. Time order is important here because time order, the independent variable must come before the dependent variable to cause it to change. So if urban decay is causing crime, then people have to experience the urban decay in order for the crime, in order for them to take part in committing crimes. So let's see. So causality, this is your last quiz question. I'm going to try to say this really quickly. Listen, I'm going to have you guys read about causality in your book. I just want to give you the answer to your third quiz question, which is that in order to prove causality, 3 factors are needed: correlation, time order, and ruling out of alternative explanations. That's your second choice for quiz question number 3. So causality is the idea that a change in one factor results in a corresponding change in another factor. So I will have you read more about causality in the next one, or yeah. Okay, thank you for joining me.